Hi, Jamie Cowen here to talk with you today about moving forward after the elections. I expect there's going to be big changes after this election. I believe that Joe Biden will win and the Democrats will take control of the Senate. Most of the evangelical community, which put their eggs into the Trump basket, will need to do some serious soul searching. As I've shared continuously since I started these vlogs months ago, I believe that the amalgamation of evangelical Christianity, conservative politics, and the Republican Party has done untold damage to the gospel. Rather than the gospel bringing healing and reconciliation, it's perceived by over the half of the country as a divisive force. As I shared in the vlog, the beginning of the end of the religious right, these religious leaders will no longer be welcomed in the White House and probably will never have similar access again. Hopefully this election will serve as a wake-up call, not as how did we lose, or oh no, the sky is falling, but rather where do we go from here? The United States needs changing. It needs a revival. God's people can and should participate in the coming changes. Now here are my suggestions of how to do that. Number 1, public repentance. Remember the famous verse that helped launch the moral majority? Quote, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and will heal their land." Now I think that we can all agree that the land needs healing. There needs to be public repentance on the part of religious leaders for promoting and endorsing political candidates and their parties. Is there any evidence of this behavior in the Bible? Can you imagine the Apostle Paul urging support for a particular candidate for Roman emperor? As I've shared previously, Billy Graham regretted being involved with politics after the Watergate affair with President Nixon. Shouldn't that be a lesson for us? And once again, evangelical leaders are involved with the president who has serious moral and ethical issues. Well, how about learning from history? Number 2, reaching across the aisle. As I've said previously, I believe there's a place for followers of Jesus to be involved in politics. However, for an entire religious community to be affiliated with one party is a huge mistake. Cultural changes in the United States are a valid concern. Abortion, LGBTQ, and religious liberty are legitimate issues for Bible believers. But rather than making these partisan, how about reaching across the aisle to the Democratic Party to try and bridge the divide? I know, for instance, that there are Democratic pro-life organizations. Yes, it's an uphill battle to get a serious hearing, but isn't the gospel about reconciliation? And you know what? The Democratic Party has a lot going for it on other biblical issues, like caring for the poor, the alien/immigrant, and the environment. Maybe we can speak to both parties about biblical issues. Number 3, reining in speech, social media, and cable TV. Look, I'm a big believer in the First Amendment. But do you know that the freedom of speech is not in the Bible? Wow, that's a revelation. In fact, let's see what the Bible does say about speech. The first passage, "Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." Another one, "But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness." Or another, "But I tell you that men will have to give account on the day of judgment for every careless word they have spoken." Ouch. That one's going to hurt a lot of us. Now look, network TV already is regulated by the government. There are certain things allowed to air and be said and certain things not. The First Amendment doesn't protect all speech. As an example, speech that incites that likely will lead to unlawful action is not protected speech. Something needs to be done about spreading conspiracy theories, bald-faced lies about others, and demeaning speech. Social media companies, like newspapers, should be held responsible for allowing these things to propagate. Believers should be at the forefront for demanding the truth and accountability, and never being the ones perpetuating falsehoods and demeaning statements. Number 4, challenging the abuse of authority. In a previous vlog about checks against the abuse of power, I shared that the biblical system of governance in ancient Israel included a system of checks and balances. Despite the system, there were many examples of the abuse of power, such as King Ahab stealing the property of another and arranging for his death, or King David sleeping with another man's wife and then arranging to have her husband killed in battle. In both cases, God used prophets to expose their sins, and God brought judgment upon the kings. In the United States, there's a very sophisticated set of checks and balances established in the Constitution that has worked well for the country. But things have gotten out of whack. Under the Trump administration, the country is almost ruled by executive fiat. The administration has ignored congressional subpoenas, circumvented the courts, and spent money not authorized by Congress. It basically does whatever it wants. Abuse of power is a terrible thing, whether in a religious community, business, or government. Inevitably, huge injustices occur and people get hurt or killed. The prophets of old challenged abuse of authority. They often pointed out injustices in society, where the marginalized were being taken advantage of by the privileged. We need to do the same and demand changes to a system that restores proper checks and balances to the government. Number 5, shared sacrifice. The life of Jesus the Messiah is one of sacrifice. The Son of God left heaven to come to earth, lived and taught our forebears, and then laid down his life for us. He modeled and taught that we should live in a similar way, that is, putting others' interests before our own. The shocking display of believers gathering in large numbers to worship the Lord while ignoring public health guidelines promulgated to protect lives is a mockery to the sacrificed Messiah. Sadly, the pandemic has exposed the condition of much of the church as self-serving and arrogant. It's time for a huge change. That includes, number 1, abiding by the likely stricter guidelines to be issued under a new Biden administration. Number 2, protecting the planet by congregations encouraging members to transition to and use renewable energy sources in homes, cars, and congregations. Number 3, reaching out to needy communities like immigrants who've been traumatized by the current administration. Number 4, supporting measures to reduce income inequality. Number 5, joining with African American churches to listen to their grievances and concerns and to work together to combat racism in any form. As Yeshua said, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me. These are just a few examples of how to move forward after the election. Tremendous ground has been lost in presenting the real claims of Jesus who don't know him. We need to showcase a new and different face. Actually, the real face of the Messiah. As Yeshua said, "Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." That's the Messiah that I follow. How about you? Thank you, and see you next time.